guess what? It's time to move on to the next anatomy unit. So here we go. The unit is on senses. Okay, and this is one of my favorite units for two major reasons. One, because it covers optical illusions and how amazing are they? And two, because we do a cow eye dissection. I just think that's so cool. So we're going to start with the topic that leads us right into the dissection, and that is obviously eyes. And those are my eyes. So let's just get started. What is the function of the eye? Okay, well, your eye detects light and then converts it into electrical impulses. Why? We need those electrical impulses to travel down a nerve and get to our brain so that we can actually interpret vision. So it's one thing to have these signals about reds and blues and greens and shape and movement and darkness, but to not be able to interpret into what we see, that would be problematic. So luckily, our brain is able to do that, work with the eye. So how do we see? First step, light's going to pass through the cornea. So that's a clear covering over the eye. And then it goes through the pupil. That's the black part in the center of the colored part of your eye. Muscles in the iris, which are the colored part of your eye, control the size of the pupil. So sometimes when you go to the doctor, they will shine a light into your eye very quickly, not for an extended period of time. And part of that is to see if your pupils will shrink like they should in a bright light. So if you are in a room with just dim light and then someone turns on a light in the room, your pupils will quickly shrink to adjust to the increase of light. And if someone turns off the light, your pupils will start to enlarge to allow more light in so you can see better. Then light passes through the lens, right? So it goes through the cornea, through the pupil, then it goes through your lens. So just like a microscope has a lens and just like a magnifying glass has a lens, your eye has a lens. And there are muscles in the ciliary body that are going to change the shape of the lens. So let me show you. So here's the lens. And then right here, okay, and you could see it in this picture too, right here, we have muscles in that ciliary body that are going to control the shape. Now, what happens is normally when you're looking at something that's far away, your lens stays in that relatively sort of flat, normal shape. But when you're looking at something up close, your lens becomes fatter, okay, in the center. And that's to enable the light to be focused still at the back of the retina. And the interesting thing, the image on the retina is upside down and backward, okay? In the retina, we have a bunch of cells that help us see. We have cones, and they work best in bright light, and they help us see color. So cones, color, and they are most sensitive to red, green, or blue. And you can see in that picture, you see various cones, red, green, and blue. And then you have rods, which you can see in that picture are gray in color. They are much more numerous, so there's fewer cones. And rods work well in dim light, and they help us interpret movement and shadows and help us see when it's not bright light. All right, so here you can see light passing through the cornea, through the pupil, through the lens, to the retina, and then all of those signals are collected and they are transmitted down the optic nerve to the occipital lobe of your brain where we interpret that. Okay, so nerves from all the cells of the retina converge at the optic nerve, and there's this structure that's formed right here, okay, the optic disc. Okay, and what's the importance of that? Well, it's a spot where there are actually no receptor cells. You see, that's where the optic nerve comes out. So that means that is actually a blind spot. We have no vision in that specific location. And most of the time, you don't notice it because our brain sort of fills in the gaps, but you can actually find your blind spot doing a couple little tricks with things written on paper. All right, and we'll talk about that. All right, so in class, we'll watch this video. Here, we are not going to do that. All right, what are the parts of the eye? Here's what we're going to talk about. Here's an overview of all the parts. I'm going to cover the parts that you can see in the front or the anterior half of the eye first, and then the posterior or back half of the eye. All right, so let's look at the front or anterior of the eye. We have the cornea. That's that clear covering at the front of the eye. It covers the iris and the pupil. And then we have the iris. That's the colored part of your eye. It surrounds the pupil and it controls the size of the pupil. So how much light enters your eye. The pupil is the black dot at the center. It can either get larger or smaller, and it's what allows light to pass through. Okay, then we have the aqueous humor, and that is some liquid that fills the space between the cornea and the lens. It helps to give, hi Belle, helps to give eyes their shape, and also helps with some of the nutrients that the eyes need. The lens is a clear disc. It helps to focus light on the retina at the back of the eye. Okay, remember that changes shape based on the ciliary body. And there we have the ciliary body that holds the lens in place and controls the shape of the lens. Now we're going to go to the posterior part. So we have the sclera. That's the white part of the eye. So you can see it around your iris in the front, but it continues all the way around your eyeball. We have the choroid. The choroid provides blood supply to the eye. And the choroid is located between the sclera and the retina. So we have sclera around the outside, then we have choroid with the blood vessels, then we have retina on top. Okay. The blind spot is the area where there are no photoreceptors, and it's at the back of your retina. And the optic nerve passes through to the surface of the retina. So all those cells of the retina converge, form the optic nerve, and that spot where the optic nerve is formed is the optic disc or blind spot. The optic nerve is the nerve that carries impulses from the retina to the occipital lobe of your brain. And one way I remember that the occipital lobe is responsible for vision is if you ever hit your head kind of hard in the back, you will see sort of stars. And it kind of reminds me that hitting your head in the back stimulates vision. So you see something that wasn't there. It's not like all of a sudden stars appeared. You hit your head, but stimulated the occipital lobe. The retina is the inner lining of the back of the eye. It contains those specialized cells called rods, which help us see in dim light, and cones, which help us see color and detail. And look, there's a spelling mistake. I'll have to fix that. And then we have vitreous humor. That's a clear, like gel fluid that fills the space between the lens and the back of the eye. So how do our eyes get protected? So there are a bunch of different ways. Okay. So we have ciliary glands or tarsal glands, and they're sebaceous glands between the eyelashes. So they secrete sebum. So what's that? That's the oily layer. Okay. Then we have lacrimal glands, and lacrimal glands are at the superior lateral part of the eye. So here they produce tears, and that helps to moisten and clean out irritants from our eye. So that would be the watery layer. Okay. And then we have mucus glands. And where are mucus glands? They're found in the conjunctiva. So what the heck is that? Well, that's a clear membrane that covers the sclera. And those mucus glands then produce the mucus layer. So truly our tears are a combination of all of those things being secreted. And then we also have additional protection from our eyelashes on the top and on the bottom that provide a protective barrier, our eyebrows that also provide some protection, and then our eyelids, okay, top and bottom, which are responsible for our blinking reflex, but also to help keep our eye moisturized and move those tears around. So what are some problems that can happen with your eye? All right, we're going to cover only a few. First is conjunctivitis, and you may heard of this because it's pink eye. It means literally an inflammation of the conjunctiva. So that clear membrane that covers over the sclera gets inflamed, and then your eye has that characteristic pink look, and it tends to be really goopy and mucousy. You could have a problem of cataracts. Cataracts involve a hardening and clouding of the lens. The lens becomes opaque, so your vision is seriously impeded. You don't see as well. So you see normal lens, nice and clear. clouded lens. So when we do the cow eye dissection, you will see a very clouded lens because the cow is no longer alive. And that is a little bit similar to what would happen with cataracts. You can see looking at this picture, you can see this eye right here is much more clouded. That is the eye that has cataracts. All right, myopia, fancy word for nearsighted. What does that mean? That means you see well near, and it's hard to see things far away. So you can see distant object, question mark, like what is that? I can see near easily and not so far away. So you can see in these pictures what happens with the myopic eye is that instead of being more rounded, it kind of gets stretched out. It's a little too long. So what happens right here is the light gets focused not on the retina, it gets focused in front of the retina. And then so your vision is blurry because it's not focusing in the right spot. Okay. Now, the reason that you end up seeing near well is because remember the lens changes shape when you see things near. So that kind of counteracts the issue with the enlarged shape of the eye. The opposite of myopia is hyperopia, and that's farsighted. So you see things far away really well, but then close up things are blurry. So this is the opposite problem. So instead of the eye being too stretched out, the eye is kind of squashed. It's a little too narrow. So what happens is the focus point is beyond the retina. So things that are close up don't get focused correctly, and actually the focal point is beyond the retina. So those things are blurry. So how do we correct vision? Well, a lot of times that's with glasses, right? So we use a lens to help adjust where the focal point is. So for myopia, we're going to use the concave lens, and it's going to change that focal point. Instead of focusing in front of the retina, I'm going to focus it on the retina, which is where I want it. And the opposite with hyperopia, I'm going to use a convex lens, and then instead of the object focusing beyond the retina, it's going to focus on the retina, which is where I want it. Colorblindness, more common in males because it's a sex-linked trait. It's the reduced ability to distinguish some colors. Colorblind doesn't mean you can't see any color. It means you have problems distinguishing certain colors. So one or more type of cone is absent or doesn't work correctly. So you can see normal color vision, you can see red and green. In red and green color blindness, they all look yellow, right? So it's hard to tell the difference. And then we have glaucoma. Glaucoma is caused by increased pressure within the eyeball. It causes a gradual loss of sight and will lead to blindness if it's not treated. And then strabismus. Strabismus means cross-eyed. Okay, so eyes don't look in the same direction at the same time. You have esotropia where they cross in and exotropia where it crosses out. You can see esotropia, this eye is crossed inward, and exotropia, that eye is crossed outward. And there you have it, all about eyes. So that was a lot. This leads us into being able to do the cow eye dissection. So excited. And into lessons about optical illusions and all kinds of cool stuff.